Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today, and special thanks to WSB for bringing us together. I'm Adam Grant. I'm an organizational psychologist and author at Wharton, and I'm delighted to have a chance to talk today with Alan Mulally, one of my very favorite leaders. I spend part of my time studying leadership, but I like to spend part of it learning from great leaders. And given what we're all dealing with now in this coronavirus pandemic, I could not think of a more helpful person to talk to than Alan. I'm sure you all know that Alan is widely admired for his leadership career as an executive at Boeing and then as CEO leading a major turnaround at Ford. Alan, welcome.
I'm glad to be here. Glad to be with you, Adam.
Well, that remains to be seen, doesn't it?
We're going to be good.
Well, I'm excited to have a chance to compare notes here. I feel like you've lived through multiple crises. I know you lived through 9/11 at Boeing. You lived through the financial crisis and recession at Ford. And when I've studied your leadership over the years, it really resonates for me because you've clearly led like a giver rather than a taker. And every time I've heard you talk about working together, I've said, oh, I wish more leaders understood how to do that effectively. And so I wondered, just for starters, if you could talk us through how you think about working together, both in normal times and also in an unprecedented crisis.
Well, that's terrific. I think that's a great place to start. And then we can really talk about how you do that during a crisis too, because it is, to your point, it's absolutely the same process and the same behaviors. So I made one slide for us, Adam.
Yes.
And as a
man after my own heart.
As a teacher, professor, you must love it that there's just one.
And that's so funny. I didn't even bring any slides. We're reversing roles here. Good.
Okay, you win. Okay, so if we can display our working together slide, be great. And as you know, I am an engineer and an airplane designer, and I actually do all my own slides. So this is my slide and a description of working together. And Adam, what I might do is just share a few thoughts about each element of the working together. And of course, this is about skilled and motivated teams that are working on something that's important, that's bigger than themselves. And so these are the principles and practices and actually the management system that we've used over the years at Boeing and also at Ford. And so I had the honor, Adam, to serve on the design team of every Boeing airplane, the 707, the 727, the 737, the 747, the 757, the 767. And then I had the honor to serve as the chief engineer and the director of engineering and the program manager for the 777 airplane. And then as the CEO of Boeing Commercial Airplanes, I helped launch the 787. And if you look at all the commercial airplanes and all the seats that are flying in commercial airplanes around the world, nearly 70% of all the seats are in a Boeing airplane. So commercial airplanes are really sophisticated and very complicated because of the safety requirements, because they carry 200 to 300 people halfway around the world. And so it's all about safe and efficient transportation. And at the height of a new airplane design, we have nearly 400,000 or 500,000 people that are working on the airplane around the world. And so you make a commitment to deliver all the performance, the reliability, the maintainability, the safety requirements. And you actually do it on a schedule, 4 to 5 years. And the airlines have all of their seats sold. They have their routes in place. And so it's really important to do this innovation and do it on a schedule and meet all the requirements. So these principles and practices are actually how we've done it on every airplane program. So just a couple of words about each one. People first, love them up. Clearly hundreds of thousands of talented people, and they're committing their life to make something that is meaningful for the world and the greater good. And so just love them up. I mean, appreciate them, help them understand everything about the program, where it is, the status, and have them, create an environment where they really enjoy the journey and each other. Everyone included. This is so important because we need to include all of the stakeholders, the traveling public, the customers, the airlines themselves, our employees, all of our suppliers, all of the governments around the world that help with the certification, and all of the communities in which we operate around the world. So include everybody, and we have a representative for all of those stakeholders actually on the leadership team. Next is a compelling vision and a comprehensive strategy and a relentless implementation plan. So you can imagine the compelling vision of getting people together around the world so they can find out they have more in common than they're different, and then they also can choose to work together for the greater good. So very, very compelling about what airplanes are about. A comprehensive strategy is so much more than just the technology strategy. It includes the partnership strategy, the working together strategy, the creating value roadmap, the business plan review process on how you're going to manage it. So everything about the strategy, and then the relentless implementation is manifested with the business plan review. And this is the meeting that has gotten so much attention, Adam, over the years, because we have the entire leadership team, all the P&L around the world, plus the skill teams. And we actually meet every Thursday. Usually we start at 6 o'clock in the morning to catch all the time zones around the world. We're all on the internet, the entire team. And we go through the vision, the strategy, and the plan, and every element of the plan. And so every week we do this, looking for the areas that need special attention. Of course, clear performance goals are really important. Having one plan, most companies have a lot of plans. Everybody's wondering what the plan is. And facts and data, really important, because we really appreciate what people think. But what we also want to know is, what are the facts and data that they're looking at to make their conclusions, so that we all can be aligned. On the right-hand side, you can see the behaviors. And everyone knows the plan, the status, and the areas that need special attention. We actually have the leaders color code their charts. We usually have around 300 charts that we go through in a couple of hours. And they'll have the plan, they'll have the status, and the areas of special attention, and they'll color code it green for every element that it's on plan, yellow, they have an issue, but they have a solution, and red, which they have a new issue, but they don't have a solution yet. And of course, those yellows and reds are gems now, because we are so thankful and appreciative that people are sharing what the real status is, so that we all can work to turn the reds to yellows to greens. You can see the other behaviors: propose a plan, positive, find a way attitude. And whenever I think of this, I think of the Henry Ford quote that said, "If you think you can, or you think you can't, you're probably right." And so when you're doing something like this, you need to expect the unexpected and expect to deal with it, because it's an invention, and it's innovation, and it's creativity, and you're going to have surprises along the way, and we're going to expect it, and we're going to expect to deal with it. Respect each other, listen to each other, help each other, appreciate each other. Emotional resilience, really important. If the leader acts like it's over, it's over. And so trust the process and go right back up the top, make sure everybody's included, the strategy's clear, what the plan is, the status of it, and help people turn the reds to yellows to greens. The last one, Adam, have fun, enjoy the journey and each other. Every morning, every night still, I'm so appreciative that I had a chance to serve two American and global icons that are dedicated to safe and efficient transportation for all of us. And so enjoy the journey and each other, all the talented people that we've had a chance to work with over the years. Now, a corollary to that is never a joke or humor at anybody's expense. And the reason is, people will go along to get along, but it's never funny. And the thing that's very serious about that when it comes to working together is that if it's not a safe environment and people feel like they are going to be made fun of, or they're going to be a victim, then they're going to be very careful about sharing what the real situation is. So there's so much to enjoy about making these great products that we never have to make a joke at anybody else's expense, so that we create that safe and that healthy environment where people know that they're going to be part of the solutions, no matter what we run into. So those are the fundamental working together principles and practices that you asked about, that we've used on every airplane program, and then we applied them to leading the organization at Boeing. When we purchased McDonnell Douglas and Rockwell, and they asked me to lead the integration of the largest aerospace company in the world, we use these very same principles and practices. We used them through the crises that you mentioned, the recessions, the terrorist attacks. And then we also, this is the only piece of paper that I took with me to Ford to help not only save Ford, but also to create an exciting, viable, and profitably growing Ford, and ended up being the number one automobile brand in the United States.
Well, that's a great place to start, Alan. There are a few things I want to follow up on.
Sure.
The first one is just this humor point. It really tracks with what I've seen in some of the data on humor, which is it's mostly insecure leaders who make fun of other people. And secure leaders are much more likely to self-deprecate and make themselves the butt of the joke. I see a lot of leaders, though, who worry that if they do too much of that people might start to think they're incompetent. Where do you set that boundary? How do you think about that?
I think that's really neat the way you asked that, because I've had that same experience with others over the years, especially as I've consulted more also. And I think the real key is really understanding what the leader's real role is, what their unique responsibility. When you get to the place where you're asked to serve at this level, you're not doing that because of your specialty that got you there. And so you're there now to nurture this environment and more importantly, to hold all of the stakeholders responsible and accountable for following the process of working together, the business plan review, the creating value roadmap, but also following those behaviors. So once you know that that's your real contribution, then it gets really clear about where that line is, because everybody knows that you know what you know, but you're creating an environment where everybody knows what the situation is. But the most important thing is that you're holding them accountable. You're the team accountable for following the process and the behaviors, which is what's going to allow you to be successful together.
Okay, so that goes to another thing you mentioned. It's so interesting and unusual to hear you use this phrase, love them up. I don't hear a lot of men talk about love, period. I definitely don't hear a lot of CEOs talking about love. And yet it speaks to some research that's come out recently by my colleagues, Sigal Barsade and Mandy O'Neill, who've shown that in settings like hospitals, when you build a culture of love, not the romantic kind, right? But we really care about each other, we support each other, we trust each other, we help each other. There are all sorts of performance benefits of that. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you think about showing love. Did you actually use that language when you were leading people, or did people find it a little too squishy?
Well, that's interesting, because I just grew up that way, and give you a couple examples about that we had relatively modest means, but we had two parents that loved us very much, and my mother, Adam, and my dad would say things like this to me every day on off to school. My mother would say, "Well, remember what the purpose of life is, honey." And I'd say, "Oh, you're right. It's to love and be loved." And then she'd remind me, "Yes, but in that order." I said, "That's good, Mom. Thanks." Then the next day she'd say, "Well, it's nice to be important, but it really is more important to be nice." "Got it, Mom. Thank you." And then the next day she'd say, "Honey, now remember to serve, live." "Okay, great, Mom. Thank you." And then the next day my dad would say, "Now remember, when you learn to work together with other people, then you're going to be able to deliver value and benefits for the greater good." So I grew up where it was all about working together. It was all about pulling everybody together and being part of something that's bigger than yourself that would benefit the greater good. So I think that's just the way I am, so that it made it okay. It wasn't a strange thing, because that's the way I am. And the two words that I have found very interesting that people respond to is, and we'll talk about that a little later, is one is the love word, and the other one is to appreciate. I mean, to really appreciate people. So I think if you operate this in this context, people know that you really are pleased that they're there, and you're really pleased that they're contributing to building this cathedral.
It's amazing that you're an engineer and you're speaking this language. So unusual.
I have heard that also before, but I think, and especially you, Ed, I mean, and all your wonderful work, this is about people, and it's about people that want to make a difference. They want to make a contribution. They want to be appreciated and recognized. They really do want to do things for the greater good, and we're giving them a chance, which is the most respectful thing I think we could ever do for all the people that are involved, all the stakeholders.
Well, that goes to another theme I wanted to talk about, which is when you talk about the greater good, I think right away of your One Ford vision. And you have an amazing story about what happened when you first showed up on the Ford lot. Would love to start there, and then I have some follow-ups.
Okay. Well, the other thing too is, depending on how you'd like to do this, probably the two that we talked about was the 9/11 in a crisis, and the other one is the Ford situation. Would you like to start with the Boeing first, or go to the Ford first?
Let's do Ford first,
okay.
And then we can loop back to Boeing if that works for you.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, so just for a little background for everybody, I was at Boeing for 37 years, and I never thought I'd leave Boeing, but then I got this wonderful call from Bill Ford that asked me to help. And at the end of the day, I felt like I was being asked to serve as second American and global icon. So got my piece of paper, and off I went to Ford. And when I arrived, and you can see the beautiful blue Boeing, the beautiful blue Ford up there. When I arrived at the airport in Detroit, that you know well, they picked me up in a Land Rover. And I'm thinking to myself, a Land Rover? It's not a Ford. I wonder what people are working on here. And so I was practicing my emotional resilience down there. And so we started to drive over to the Ford headquarters. And for all of you, Adam grew up in the Detroit area, so he knows all this really well. And you go by the Ford Museum, the Henry Ford Museum, which is the #2 attraction in the United States behind the Smithsonian, because Henry Ford was an unbelievable inventor. And if you ever get a chance to visit it, just please avail yourself of that opportunity. So we go by that, and then we get to Dearborn, and this is Dearborn. This is where Henry Ford was born, and it's like countryside. It's beautiful, and we get close to the world headquarters of the Ford Motor Company, 12-story building. The blue oval is 3 stories high, and so I'm a little nervous, but I'm not afraid. And so we get close, and we disappear underneath the building. The doors open up automatically, and I realize that I'm in the parking garage for the executives at the world headquarters. And Adam, there was not one Ford vehicle in the garage. There are Aston Martins and Jaguars and Land Rovers and Volvos, all the other brands that we had purchased. So I'm practicing my emotional resilience again about when the way everybody's working on here, when 70% of the business is Ford. So to your question, they take me up. Bill takes me upstairs to the auditorium where we do our town halls and our earnings calls and all of our employee meetings. Wonderful facility, and it's full of journalists. And Bill walks me out on the stage, and he introduces me as the new CEO of Ford, and then he sits down. And so I'm having this impromptu press conference with all of the journalists that are there, and all these journalists are online. And the two stories that I'd like to share about the culture. So they started asking me question after question, and so the two questions that I wanted to share with you is, finally they were getting kind of comfortable with me, and I was answering the questions the best I could because I just had gotten there. And so one of the journalists said, "So, Mr. Mulally, the automobile business is very, very sophisticated and complicated, starting with the products themselves. And you don't know anything about this business and how complicated it is and the products themselves. So what does it mean to us that you're here as the new leader of the Ford Motor Company?" So I rubbed my chin very thoughtfully at him, and I said, "Well, I sure agree with you. It's a very sophisticated business, and it's nearly 20% of the GDP, and with all the technology companies and the support, and it is very sophisticated. And an average car or truck has around 10,000 parts. And you think about the quality and the fuel efficiency and the safety and the systems engineering, very sophisticated products. I might point out that the 777 airplane has 4 million parts, and it stays in the air." And so the next day, 3-inch headlines in the Detroit News. "I think we got the right guy." And the other one, Adam, on the culture, and you know this because you grew up there. And one of the journalists said, "So, Mr. Mulally," they always start out with Mr. Mulally. "So, Mr. Mulally, we've noticed that the color of your slacks are different than the color of your coat." And so I looked down, and I did have my normal sport coat, and and slacks. I have my 3 colors slacks and my 2 Brooks Brothers blue coats. And I said, yes, they are. And did you have a question? They said, well, you probably don't know this, but the automobile industry is very buttoned up. And all of the leaders in the automobile industry, all of their slacks match the color of their coat. Matter of fact, they have very starched white shirts and very shiny cufflinks. And most have a little handkerchief that matches the print on their tie. I said, whoa, that is good to know. And do you have a question? They said, well, we want to know tomorrow morning in the world headquarters of the Ford Motor Company, is it going to be okay for the executives to wear sport coat and ties? And I said, very decisively, rubbed my chin again. I said, absolutely. Next day, 3-inch headlines. Culture change has already begun at Ford. And I didn't realize it, Adam. I didn't realize it until somebody told me later that I was the first CEO to come into the automobile industry from outside the industry. So I think that's one of the reasons they were so interested in this new leader.
It's a fun story for me in part because when I've watched companies and advised companies on CEO succession and selection, one of the things they're always asking about early on is culture fit.
Yep.
And they pay attention to a lot of irrelevant cues like, well, how do you dress? Do you follow the norms? And my read of the data on CEOs is they actually add more value sometimes when they clash a little bit with the culture, because then they end up stretching it, right? If we've always had a task-oriented culture, it's more helpful empirically to bring in a more relationship-oriented CEO and vice versa, right? So I love the way that you push the culture a little bit.
Well, to your point, Adam, you can imagine that if this is the way we're going to operate, remember, they hadn't seen this yet, but they were going to see it the next day, that this environment that we're talking about creating and nurturing is not buttoned up. And it's not warm and fuzzy. It is about respecting each other, including everybody. So anything that would get in the way to put boundaries between people, you would want to be very careful, because you want to create a very inclusive working together based on respect for each other and what you're trying to get done. So you're absolutely right. You want everything to support the working together principles and practices.
So on that note, you came in, it seemed like you had your work cut out for you, and then the financial crisis hit. What are the lessons from that experience that you think are applicable to the current pandemic?
Well, lots of them. When I first arrived, and Bill had told me everything about this, because Bill is a fantastic person and a great leader, and he really wanted to help at that time to save Ford, because Ford had become very regionalized, as you know, and Henry Ford had set Ford up to operate all around the world, which he was ahead of his time to, support the economy and energy independence and security and environmental sustainability, and also provide great jobs and great careers to everybody. But they had become very separate Ford companies around the world, and they had no scale to compete with the powerhouses from Europe and Japan and China. And also, they had purchased a bunch of brands, Aston Martin, Jaguar, Land Rover, Volvo, Mazda, in addition to having Ford and Lincoln and Mercury. And so really a house of brands. And so that beautiful blue oval had really lost its clarity and its brand promise. Also, we had union agreements that precluded us from matching our production to the real demand. So as you go through any kind of a cycle or an exogenous shock, economic cycle, we would actually keep the production up more than the demand, flood the distribution channel and all the dealers with automobiles, and everybody would lose money, and then we'd wait for the economy to come back. And so we were losing money on every brand and every vehicle. And Adam, the first forecast I saw in the fall, forecast for the profits for the entire year was a $17 billion loss. That was the forecast. And 3 months later, we achieved it. So This wasn't a forecast accuracy issue. We needed to focus on our vision again and a strategy and a plan. So,
Wow. Alan, that's got to be a rare moment where you actually hope to fall short of your forecast.
well, it's another point. Ford has a lot of talented people. I mean, it's got fabulous employees, and they have world-class talent in every position. We just needed to clarify the vision, strategy, and the plan. And so the first thing we did is put together the One Ford plan, as you mentioned, which meant that we were going to focus on the Ford brand. We were going to restructure the operations to match our production to the real demand. We were going to simultaneously invest in the new products. So we had a complete family of best-in-class vehicles on cars, utilities, and trucks, and quality and safety and fuel efficiency and also affordability. And also we were going to work together as one team around the world. And that's where the One Ford plan came from, using these principles and practices. And then the last item was that we knew we needed money to finance this plan. So we went to the banks. We had 500 banks that were interested in hearing our plan to create value and save Ford. And so in about 10 days, we raised nearly $23.5 billion to finance the plan, both the restructuring and invest in the new products and have a cushion that if we had a slowdown in the economy, I never anticipated we were going to have as big a one as we did in 2008. But so we had the financing, and so we went to work on all of those elements of the plan using our working together. And we were making great progress. The products were looking good. The restructuring, the unions were cooperative. We were really making a lot of progress. As a matter of fact, we got to the first quarter of 2008, and Adam, we made $100 million. And remember, we'd gone from $17 million loss to $100 million in that quarter. We were so thankful and so happy. And then the financial crisis hit. And then the market dried up. In the United States, we went from 17 million vehicles being sold to 9 million. And very few industries can get by, even survive with that kind of throughput. So we had, and then of course, GM and Chrysler were close to bankruptcy. And so we actually, the only place that they could get financing would be from the U.S. government. So we actually went back with them to support them that they would get temporary financing, because if they would have gone under into free fall, it would have taken the U.S. And all the technology companies into a recession that the Treasury Department thought would be worse than the Depression.
Wow.
Even though we didn't need the money, and we were well on our way to saving Ford and creating a viable Ford, we did that for the good of the country and the world economy. So we kept using the working together process, and we got back to the number one brand in the United States, and everybody out of the hearings watching this. And so they learned about Ford. They learned that Ford was ahead of the restructuring and the new products. And we had no idea that they would start researching the vehicles. They started coming to all the Ford dealerships.
Yep.
And they were so proud to be associated with these great products, but also the fact that we didn't take precious taxpayer money. And so we used the same working together principles, and then we ended up delivering $8 billion, $9, $10, $11, and $12 billion in profit over the years, and becoming the number one brand. But the thing that was most exciting about that, Adam, is that when we look at all the measures of our performance, whether it's the market or whether it's our employees, how they feel, how the investors feel, how the suppliers feel, how the communities feel, because we look at all of the stakeholders as measures. The measure that I am to this day still most impressed with and pleased with is how the employees felt. And all companies do employee surveys, and as you know really well, that the average percent positive about how employees feel is in the 30 to 40%. And that means that 60% of the people are not really engaged with the company and don't believe in and what's happening. And so when we finished, our employee survey was over 90% positive because people knew what Ford stood for because we divested all the other brands. They knew what the blue oval stood for. All the stakeholders were benefiting, and all the customers were benefiting. And they were so proud to not only be making the best cars and trucks in the world, but contributing to the economy, to energy independence and security, and also environmental sustainability.
Well, it's an amazing turnaround story, Alan, and it resonates a lot for me in part because my grandpa actually worked in a Ford plant in the 1950s.
Oh, very good.
Which, I know there were culture problems even going that far back, right? And challenges with getting people to feel like they were working as part of the same team. And that's something I want to dive into in a little bit of depth. I feel like in the last, 7-8 years, ever since I published Give and Take, one of the most frequent questions I've gotten from leaders and managers, but also from employees, is if I've got a selfish colleague who's not necessarily putting the team first, or who's not willing to share knowledge, what do I do with that person? And I thought we could try to bring this to life a little bit by actually role playing a bit. So, Alan, if you're up for it, I'd love to take the role of the selfish employee because I've got a couple of behaviors my colleagues want to change in me, and see if you can talk me out of them. Are you game?
Oh, sure.
All right. So I've been told by several colleagues that it makes their lives extremely difficult when I'm consistently running late. And my justifications for that are I hate disengaging from a project when it's not done yet. I really love to finish the things that I start. And I'm also I just pack too much into the day, and I'm trying to get too much done and respond to too many people. So apparently that's a problem. And one of the ways I've managed that is I don't go into the office a lot because then I save commuting time and I can get even more done. But then my colleagues don't like it so much when I don't show up for faculty meetings. So talk me through why I should think about changing, because I'm pretty content with the status quo.
Oh, that is great. And for everybody that's listening, we have not rehearsed this. And so bear with us a little bit because, Adam needs my help. He needs us working together help, and I'm ready to help you.
Alan, to be honest, I don't feel like I do need your help. I feel like I'm meeting my goals. Occasionally my colleagues are a little bit annoyed that I'm late, but they know I'm chronically late. And if it bothered them that much, they could always choose not to work with me, right?
Well, that might be part of the issue, Adam. So let's talk about that. What's interesting about this is that I have been confronted with this situation a number of times. This exact situation that you're describing about attending the meetings and showing up for what we agreed to. So, Adam, the way I would approach it with you is that I just start out really simply as and you were part of coming together on this vision that we have for the organization. In your case, the wonderful Wharton School of Business. And so, like, if I were the dean, I would have a conversation something like this: is that we really worked hard together with your dynamite help, Adam, to create a vision for the school going forward, and also that we wanted to provide even more value to our students by enhancing our curriculum of multidiscipline offerings and teachings that are needed in our world today. And we also agreed that with your help, that we were going to follow a process of meeting regularly to review the plan that we had agreed to and the areas need special attention. And each of us then could help on the areas that need special attention so we could deliver on our vision of create even more multidiscipline offerings that the students want so much today and need so much today. And Adam, and we've noticed, Adam, that you're late to many of our meetings of our team. And also sometimes you don't show up at all. And I wanted to know why. Why are you walking away from this commitment that you made with us to work together?
Well, Alan, it's so kind of you to take an interest in what goes on in my life every day, and it's always a privilege to serve under such a caring dean. So I appreciate that. I guess I would say a couple things. One, I got into this field because I was passionate about two things. One is I love teaching. I will do anything I can to support students and share knowledge with them. And then two is I love discovering and sharing new ideas more broadly that will help people rethink how they work and lead and live their lives. And, we do a lot of stuff that's not relevant to those missions, right? I didn't become a professor because I wanted to help or inspire other professors, right? So, I feel like my time is better invested in either helping students or continuing to produce knowledge and disseminate that knowledge. I do feel guilty from time to time when I'm late and my colleagues are waiting for me. But I also know that sort of the upside of that is I finish a lot of the projects I'm doing early. And my colleagues know they can count on me when it comes to delivering. And so I just feel like I'm doing what you expected of me. Do you not feel that way?
Well, no, I don't, because, we asked you to join our leadership team. And we also agreed that we had a vision that we were going to offer more multidiscipline programs, not just in your specific area, but multidiscipline programs. And you helped us with that, developed that plan, and you agreed to it. And so I understand completely that might not be how you really want to spend your time. And if that's true, it's okay. And okay meaning that we probably need to talk about you focusing more on what you really want to focus on and not being part of the leadership team going forward. Because we need this leadership team to work together to deliver this compelling vision. Now, remember, our principles and practices are, we still love you, Adam, and we want you to be wildly successful at what you do. It's just that we need to make a modification here so you can focus on that, and we can get somebody that represents your discipline on our leadership team. So why don't you think about that, and we'll think about that, and let's get together sooner rather than later and decide what you really want to do.
Well, Alan, that was wonderful. You just crystallized for me why I prefer to study leadership and advise leaders as opposed to doing it myself. I'm clearly not qualified to have that responsibility, but I love the way you articulated. One, so I felt three things in that conversation. One, I felt like I was sort of falling short on my commitments, and it was very effective how you reinforced what you and I had agreed to. When I came in, and you didn't even know what you and I had agreed to, but I felt the pressure anyway. Secondly, I felt a pretty clear sense that I would be letting you down personally if I didn't deliver. And then third, what I found really appealing at the end was you gave me a choice. And I felt like I could still be a respected and valued member of the team. I just wouldn't be in a leadership role anymore. So I imagine this is not your first rodeo. How does what you just did map on to how you handle these conversations in real life?
That's great. It just makes me smile. So here's two examples. It's exactly the same thing. It's just amazing. So you can imagine with these working together principles and practices and following the process and behaviors that it doesn't work for them. And just like your simulation pointed out, and it's okay. You got to make it okay. And so one example was that we had a very senior member of the leadership team, and he had huge responsibility, and he didn't want to come to the business plan review. It's exactly the situation that you just laid out for us. And so the most important thing I do, again, is hold myself and everybody else accountable for following this process. So I talked to him about it, and I reviewed to him why we wanted to work together and what the value was that we're working together, and that this is what we weren't doing before, and this is what's going to lead us to save our Ford. And he actually went around me to Bill Ford and said, Bill, I'm sure you're going to protect me, but I don't really want to go to these meetings. And
a man after my own heart.
And Bill said to him, bless his heart, I think you better listen to Alan. That's why I hired him, and I'm going to back him up. Well, it turned out that he chose to move on, and I didn't. And I gave him that choice, and it's okay. I mean, he could have even stayed if he wanted to. He was a good contributor. So then I had another senior leader that in every BPR, Adam, every business plan review, he was really smart, and he would go after the person that was given a report. Like, he'd find something about what they said that wasn't quite right in his opinion or whatever, and he'd just go after them. And you can imagine how this just stopped the working together. So he did this a few times, and I followed him up to his office, and I said, I had my piece of paper, and I said, this is not the way we agreed that we're going to act. And he said, well, I know, but I've been very effective. I know I'm command and control, and I know I'm rough, and I'm very smart, and I'm not so sure I can operate this way, Alan. And I said, well, I understand, and it's okay. And he said, it's okay. And I know, I could see in his eyes, Adam, he was thinking that I'm so valuable that I'm going to give him an exception. It's okay. And I said, well, what I mean is that it's okay because you'd be choosing to move on, because this is what we agreed to. And remember why we agreed to this. We need not only a smart organization, but we need a healthy organization. And we need everybody's hearts and minds. I mean, this is the biggest thing that we're ever going to do together for the greater good. And this is the way we're going to do it. This is the only way to create this environment. And if it doesn't work for you, it's okay. You're deciding to move on. And we still love you. Go back up the first principle again, into your neat way that you described that. You're a human being, and we wish you the very best. But I know you're going to be happier. I know the team's going to be happier. And I'm going to be happier. I don't have to keep coming up and talking to you about it. And so what I want you to do is I want you to think about it tonight. And then I want you to come tell me what you're going to do. Because I'm not going to try to work this out if you don't really want to do it. And if you do, we'll be here to help. You won't be perfect right away because you developed the style over a lot of years. But let me know. So that happened with two different senior leaders. The first one decided to leave. And then the second one decided to adopt the principles and practices and the behaviors and became one of the best leaders I have ever been associated with. So to your point is, it is okay. But at the end of the day, holding the team accountable for the process of working together and the behaviors is the most important thing you have to do as a leader.
So, Alan, I love the approach. It tracks very closely with what I taught for years in negotiation around, just very simply, when somebody says something you might not entirely like, just, kind of summarizing the behavior and then testing your understanding. So, it seems like you don't want to be part of the leadership team here. If you don't, that's okay. It's your call. You let me know.
We still love you. We still love you.
It's a great message.
Yeah.
But it's easier to deliver when you have power, when you're the leader. How do you think about this when you're peer-to-peer, or maybe earlier in your career and you had people who are either lateral or even above you who weren't necessarily on the same team mentally?
Well, it's a terrific question because we're all leaders in just how we be and how we are and how we act. And I guess that's why I'm so I'll always be so focused on the leadership from the top of the organization, the leader and the leadership team, because they're going to set that environment that allows everybody to operate this way. And that's why leaders that don't operate this way, it makes it very difficult, as you point out, for somebody to be acting different than the kind of the accepted culture. And it doesn't make any difference about the words on the piece of paper. I mean, you can have whatever words you have there. It's got to be that the leader and the leadership team actually operate this way, and they live this way, and they are this way. And until you have the leader that operates this way, you have to do the best you can, because you have to figure out how to get along as long as you're in that role in the company. But in your own way, you can be a beacon of hope about how you can operate. There is another way to operate that is based on these principles. You just can't. Just be careful how to do it, because if that's not the culture, you're going to be it's going to be tough for you, and you might want to think about maybe joining a different organization that's more aligned with your values.
Yeah, that certainly tracks with what I've experienced over the years. And one of the techniques I've tried in that situation, and certainly advised some leaders and some students to test out as well, is to say, okay, if you've got a person more senior than you who doesn't necessarily want to get and row in the same direction, why don't you go to that person and ask their advice? And say, hey, listen, I'd love to build a more collaborative culture here. I know a lot of people aren't getting the support that they need. And Alan, I've noticed that people really look up to you, and that you're amazing at getting people to do things. I would really value your guidance on how we can move in a more collaborative direction around here. And what seems to happen psychologically is first you've flattered the leader and told them how respected and admired they are. Second, you force them to take your perspective and think about, okay, why might collaboration be so valuable? And in response to that, what some leaders will do is they'll actually step up and help you do it. In other cases, they'll at least give you some suggestions, and then you can apply them to the current situation.
Sure.
So I want to go back then to your days at Boeing.
Sure.
I feel like the airline industry obviously was hit especially hard by 9/11. And I think there are a lot of parallels between the emotions you must have gone through then and what a lot of people are feeling during the coronavirus pandemic now.
Absolutely.
So what would you say are the big lessons that you took away there that we could all apply today?
Oh boy, every time I think about it, it takes my breath away, Adam. I was actually in Sapporo, Japan on 9/11, and it was getting to be like 10 o'clock at night, and I was watching a small TV. CNN wasn't available at the time, and as a pilot, when I was looking at it, it looked like a small airplane was hitting a building. It's like I got in my seat and walked up to the TV to watch it, and of course I recognized that the airplane was a 767, and I remember I could hardly breathe, and we never ever imagined that a commercial airplane would ever be used as a weapon, Adam, ever. This is a commercial airplane taking people safely and efficiently around the world. And I knew that the world as we know it had changed and would never be the same. And I remember calling a good friend, Jim Goodwin, who was the chairman, the CEO of United Airlines at the time. And he was in their bunker with all of their scopes looking at all the United Airlines planes. And he shared with me what was happening. There was a terrorist attacks, and they didn't know how many terrorists were out there. And they were getting ready to decide, as a country, we were getting ready to decide whether to put all the airplanes on the ground. And I said, can I just stay on the line with you and just be here with you and support you? And he said, sure. And so a few minutes later, the United States, we decided to put all the airplanes on the ground, and they had 30 minutes to get on the ground. And that was all the airplanes that were coming into the United States, but all the airplanes that were flying internally in the United States. And all the scopes with their idents kept going dark, 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 dark. Pretty soon there were no more airplanes in the air. And so we got back to the United States after a couple of days. And of course, our working together principles and practices were needed more than ever. We got the team together. We analyzed the situation. And we had to get through really dealing with reality, not the way we hoped it might be or we wished it would be, but like what really is happening. And what is that going to mean to Boeing and to each of us around the world? And of course, the immediate impact was that people were terrified about flying. And so we actually had delivered maybe 700 airplanes the year before, and then less than 300 airplanes the following year. And you can imagine, again, what that meant, because very few companies could even survive that kind of reduction in their throughput. And so we knew we needed to move aggressively to restructure the business to match the production of the real demand. We knew it was going to, we couldn't keep everybody employed. We looked at every possible way for furloughs and reduced work hours and every combination that we could, like we're doing today in the United States, and sharing everything, sharing the situation, our financial situation, our production strategy, everything with all of the employees so they knew. We actually had to terminate a number of people, and we treated them with respect, with compassion. We committed to them we're going to do everything we could to turn this around as quickly as possible. We even shared with them, Adam, that we were going to focus our limited research and development dollars. We're going to focus that on building the airplanes for the future. So the derivative of the 777, and also developing the new 787 that would complement the 777 to take people point to point nonstop halfway around the world. So that as we came out of this, we would be in a position that we could offer these great jobs and great careers back. And we took as much time with the people that left as we did with the people that stayed. And back to your work on survivor's guilt. And because everybody needed to know that this was all about people first. It was all going to be about deal with the current reality. We developed a detailed plan for doing that. And we came out the other side, and we came out as the number one commercial airplane company in the world. And we were able to provide great jobs and great careers to most of the people that had left. And so the principles and practices, they work on building a company, and they also work on dealing with exogenous shocks, just like what we're dealing with today. And you can see the parallels of all of the stakeholders need to be included today, the private sector, the government, the businesses, using all of our talents, dealing with the reality, dealing with facts and data, helping each other, getting a detailed plan together. And as we balance the virus, the solution of the virus with the economy, you can imagine what an integrated plan that we need, including all the stakeholders, because we have never had an exogenous shock that would go at 60 or 70% of the entire GDP at one time when no one did anything wrong. And so clearly working together and the leadership for nurturing this working together is going to be prized and needed more than ever today.
Alan, one of the things that's interesting to me about the way that you've approached leadership is you seem to have mastered the art of repetition. And I see a lot of leaders get frustrated with this. They feel like it's boring to deliver the same message over and over again. Like, how many times am I going to have to say working together before people get it? How do you think about striking that balance between keeping the message fresh, but still reinforcing that same vision and set of values over and over again?
Adam, this is really a great and important conversation, because you're absolutely right. My experience with most leaders is when they are asked to serve at this level, they think they need to be saying new things every week and pontificating on stuff. And it just causes all these work streams and all this confusion. And the most important thing for the leader is that consistency of purpose that you're describing. So you've worked together, you pulled the entire team together, just like the One Ford plan. Now you're going to implement it. That doesn't mean you change the plan every week. It means you follow the plan. And the answer to your question is, what you do is you celebrate the progress on the plan. And so instead of adding lots of new work streams, and I'll give you a good example of that. A lot of times somebody will present at the first, they would present an item, and finally when they got enough courage to put a red item on, when Mark made that breakthrough, when all the charts were green. And I kept saying to them, you guys are losing $17 billion. Is there anything that's not going well? And of course, they were scared to death because people disappeared when they showed the bad news. I said, these are gems. This is great. And so as they were able to start sharing the problems, then we could actually work together to turn the reds to yellows to greens. But I watched so many leaders over the years, if somebody would share a problem, then start asking them questions. And did you think of this? And did you think of that? Well, if you're the leader, those are work streams, those direction. That's not a question. And so you cause all this extra work. You're going to be back together next week at the BPR. And so let everybody do their job. Anybody that can help is going to help them now. And the best thing you can do is nurture that environment of the working together, as opposed to creating all these other work streams. a funny thing, Adam, to your point, a number of the journalists over time would go to our communications people, and I was working closely with, and they'd say, we love Alan, and we understand the plan, the 1-4 plan, like you asked about. We understand the plan, but we need some new stuff to write about. Can you ask Alan to make a new card up, a new working together card, maybe, and maybe a new 1-4? And they would say no, and they'd come to me and say, no, this is the plan, and we're still working on the plan. Let's spend time reporting the progress on the plan, because that's a fulfilling prophecy where everybody knows that what they're working on really does work. And so that's what I would tell them. No, the plan's the plan, and until we have an exogenous shock and we have to change the plan, then this is the plan. And even then, the fundamentals of the plan didn't change. But I have shown this chart for 47 years. 47 years. And I start out the business plan review. The leader has to start it out. I show this chart. This is how we're working together. Here's the process. Here's the behaviors. Then I actually show the vision chart, opening the highways to all mankind at Ford, and safe and efficient transportation, getting people together at Boeing. I'd show one chart that has all the elements of the strategy on, and I'd say no change to the vision, no change to the working together, no change to the plan. Then I'd actually show the status of the plan. So I'd have a matrix organization with the profit and loss vertically, the functions, and then they would have worked together to share, is it red, yellow, green, in each of their area of responsibility around the world. And then we'd go through the whole plan status, and then we'd update that. The system would update that.
Yeah.
So we knew. So I did that every BPR every week. And I think I missed maybe, 15 BPRs over all that time, Adam, because you just call in wherever you are around the world, you call in. You can't stand. You're just looking forward to see what the colors are changing, whether they're more reds or the reds to turn the yellows and greens, just to nurture that environment of working together.
Well, there's an aspect of that during a crisis is so appealing, which is you've created some predictability for people. At the same time, it makes me wonder, does that mean you didn't mind being a little boring?
Well, I don't consider myself to be boring. I think the fact that I was there loving them up and nurturing this process, and they knew they were the center of attention, not me. And can you imagine too, Adam, you've written a lot about this, and you really do get it, in my opinion. Think about the responsibility and the people feel to each other, not just to a leader that they report to, but they are there every week sharing their part of the plan for the overall 1-4 plan or 1 Boeing plan and what the status is. Can you imagine a leader that would show an element of the plan, a product development piece or whatever, and it was red, and then they'd come back the next week and they'd say to the team, and it's still red, they say, well, the hell with all of you. I was really busy last week. I didn't have time to work on that item. Can you imagine how many people they would see after the meeting would come to see them? Like, what are you doing? And so you've now created an environment where the accountability and the responsibility is to everybody. It's to what you're doing as an organization, not to one leader. So again, that leader is as a coach now. It's a facilitator. It's a nurturer of the business. They know you're technically competent. You have your business acumen and stuff. But what your real value is to nurture that working together environment and love them up.
I wish we had more leaders who understood that right now, right? That it's not about you as the leader. It's actually about your people and your mission. And you embody that so well. Alan, in closing, I just wonder if you have any parting advice for leaders or employees on how to face this crisis.
Well, I think we've really talked about it, and I started out I am still concerned about where we are, but I also am very pleased that Nikki and I have been married for 50 years, and we have 5 kids, and we happen to have 3 in New York, and I'm just so pleased that we've got guidelines on how to act and be during the virus, and we have everybody working on the testing and the vaccine and how we bring the economy back in the right way, so we do it in a safe way for everybody. So we all can do our part, starting with following the plan, following the process. So I'm encouraging our leaders and helping as best I can to keep refining that plan and be part of the plan, and then be a willing worker to support the plan. And that's what the working together is really about.
Well, that seems like the mark of servant leadership, as far as I know it.
So, Adam, just one thing to continue our conversation about your continuing role going forward. I'm really glad we're going to get to talk about that in the future, and I'm glad that you're thinking about what you really want to do. But I also would like to say that what you have been doing is making a meaningful contribution in the realm of organizational psychology, and I applaud you for that, and I appreciate the time today. And I also like to thank Washington Speakers Bureau for getting us together and offering us a chance to talk about this, because it's on everybody's mind. So it was a pleasure to work with you, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
As do I. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, WSB, and thanks to all of our viewers this afternoon /evening/morning for tuning in.
Great.